Good afternoon and welcome to another great webinar sponsored by the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology and the New England Regional Defense Industry Collaboration, NERDIC. Welcome back. I guess some of you who may have joined the previous ones. Today's program is going to be about an introduction to 3D printing, additive manufacturing to assist traditional manufacturing. You've heard so much about additive over the time. This program is really important because, it's going to talk about the basics. It's something that you could think about with additive and get really confused or maybe think it's incredibly daunting. But there's a lot of great use cases and a lot of things that we can talk about that bring it down to a level that everybody can kind of get that base understanding. So the program today is going to be really great. As you can see the agenda, the opening remarks, Forrest Wentworth. I'm going to introduce Forrest in just a moment. Jeff Crandall from CCAT, he manages our additive programs, is going to be on. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end, so all of you can access the chat room, put some questions in there, and then Nasir Manin, who you've heard in the past on some of these webinars as well, will come on, talk about some of the real interesting things after this program that you can actually be signing up for demonstrations and pilot programs. So really great, impactful program. A little bit about NERDIC. NERDIC has been around for a while now, and I've had the great pleasure of working with NERDIC in the steering committee in particular since last year. So, this whole thing has really come together in a really special way. As you can see, NERDIC is in the center here, and the whole purpose of it, they're talking about an Industry 4.0 readiness program and really building that ecosystem. And that's what it's about, because when you look at our regional supply chain, when you look at the industries that are here, when you look at the MEPs and the PTAPs, and you look at the educational institutions, and you look at all of this, you're like, well, we have a really amazing ecosystem all throughout New England. I mean, state by state, we're pretty strong, but when we pull these assets and resources together, it really makes us an incredibly impactful region, and one that we could probably compete anywhere around the world as we align our resources. And NERDIC has really pulled together this defense supply chain in particular, and really look to do a great job as we focus. If you look in that column to the right there, you've got the Industry 4.0 technologies, model-based definition, automation. We're talking about additive manufacturing today, and of course, virtual reality and artificial intelligence, all these things that companies are going to be looking at as they move forward to increase their technical capability. So the whole NERDIC team, the steering committee especially, can't thank you all enough, pulling together all the New England states, pulling together all the service providers, and CCAT, it's a huge pleasure for us to be able to serve you in this way. So, we talk as one of the partners of NERDIC are the MEPs. And right now, what I'd like to do is bring on Forrest Wentworth. The MEPs are more valuable than ever. I mean, they've been valuable for decades, but now as we go forward, and we've seen this technology increase, and it's not just about lean anymore, it's about really kind of high-end, technology adoption, and of course, CMMC and cybersecurity. But Wentworth, the project manager at the main MEP, but I mean, he wears some pretty big hats, and also the Advanced Manufacturing Center for Additive Metals at the University of Maine. So, Forrest, it's great having you on. Love to kind of hear your take on how you guys are addressing the supply chain here, a little bit about the NERDIC program, and then even about today's program.
Yeah, sure. So, Ron, I really want to thank you all for having me. I think it's a great opportunity for Maine MEP and the Advanced Manufacturing Center and all the folks that are watching today. I had a chance to catch up on last week's presentation. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And I think Patricia really nailed it. Patricia and yourself really nailed it as far as the MEP system and how important the MEP system is to our New England manufacturers, and how we really need to leverage our resources and collaborate together. So my position, being project manager with Maine MEP and the University of Maine's Advanced Manufacturing Center, along with the Center for Additive Metals Manufacturing, lots of acronyms, alphabet soup, but nonetheless, it's a partnership between the Maine MEP system and the University of Maine system, the flagship college in the state. So my position is right at the Advanced Manufacturing Center. So I am basically a liaison for the Maine MEP system to the University of Maine system in all of our research and development centers, and particularly the Advanced Manufacturing Center. My other colleagues cover all of the the other aspects of whatever an enterprise may need. But at the Advanced Manufacturing Center, we have more recently developed the Center for Additive Metals Manufacturing, which is very important to today's presentation, obviously. We're talking about additive manufacturing. And we are a facility that main manufacturers, the manufacturers all throughout New England, can come and test out and work with our highly technical staff on coming up with solutions or trying to figure out how does this technology work for us? How can we utilize this technology so that we can we can move our bottom line, or we can expand, or we can hire more folks, or we can solve a problem that we've had for years and years. How can this help us out? So very exciting stuff. I'm very happy to be here today.
You know, Forrest, one of the things, just at the end, one of the things you said about people from companies from all over New England can tap into you. And, you know, that's the exciting thing. You'll look at what you have at your center in there in Maine, and you look at the Berkshire Innovation Center. We're having them on. And you look at CCAT, and you look at these resources. Like, look, these are New England-wide resources. And now we're finally kind of talking around that same platform, that within that same ecosystem that NERDIC has brought together. So, you know, do you see these conversations kind of expanding? I mean, we want something sustainable, and is that something that you guys are working towards as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. There is no better plan than for us all to be very aware of what we are capable of as individual centers and what we are capable of all together, and that networking and making sure that we are aware of what's going on at each facility, because the better way that we can advance the manufacturing within New England and make sure that we're competitive especially with these new technologies and Industry 4.0, it's a daunting task for a lot of folks and their companies. The only way to do that is to have a clear line of communication and groups and systems like this, why we're here today, so that we're aware of what's going on in other groups and we know who to contact, and we can get that information quickly to the manufacturers in New England. I think it is the gold standard of how this should work. I fully believe that.
And Forrest, our audience is really the small manufacturers, and
yep.
You know, we have to kind of understand what it takes to operate a business. So we have the same issues with us. I mean, our centers are not inexpensive. I mean, they are expensive to run. So, you know, if you've got a capability, and Berkshire Innovation has another capability, and CCAT has a capability, you know, we wouldn't want to replicate that per se. It's just too expensive. Why don't we use your capability that you might be really proficient at, and really leverage these resources and make sure that we're all working together, so we're not duplicative, or we're not just really spending money on real expensive things that we could be utilizing better in a network.
Absolutely, Ron. I mean, and that's how small business works in general, not just in manufacturing, small business in general. We lean on each other, we lean on the resources, and we utilize each other to get the job done. Yeah, that's the best way it works. And we do, you know, Maine is a very rural manufacturing community. We do have, you know, a hub down in the southern part of the state, but, you know, almost the highest majority of our manufacturers are small and medium sized. That's who we are working with. And we're coming up with right-sized solutions for those folks. And I'll be honest, I grew up in a small manufacturing company, so I know, you know, pretty much firsthand what it's like to operate a small manufacturing facility. So,
well, you brought up a great point, right-sizing the solution. You know, if you take out the big folks, you know, you're looking at maybe 20, or, you know, it's certainly under 25 is the average size of many of these companies, 25 employees. So.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, that's great, Forrest. Look, I know we're going to hear more from you guys. You know, thank you for the Maine MEP and all of your interactions, certainly with NERDIC. And, you know, obviously, it's so important for CCAT to have these engagements with everybody as well. So we look forward to talking with you again in the future.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Forrest. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Jeff Crandall. Jeff is the manager of Additive Technologies, and boy, he's been in Additive Technologies for probably about a decade now. So, you know, Jeff's one of the guys that when we started talking about this a long time ago, there wasn't much traction, and there is a tremendous amount of traction and discussions about this, you know, from the global industrial companies all throughout the business community. So it really is in front of us. So Jeff's program today going to really be enlightening and helpful to companies, and kind of guiding you on this additive manufacturing journey. Everything that Jeff's presenting today, I want to let you know, is going to be in handout form. You will be able to receive all of this, and you can put any of the questions into the chat room for Jeff after. But, you know, Jeff, you provided tremendous guidance. Again, over the years, you've completed some tremendous projects that actually have gone on really well. So, you know, your expertise is invaluable, and we really look forward to your presentation.
No, thank you, Ron. It's a pleasure to present today, and it's really exciting to be a part of NERDIC and just the growth that's taking place when we look at New England as a region instead of individual states. The synergy is just so important. So let's go to the next slide. We're going to do a very quick 30 seconds on CCAT's Advanced Manufacturing Center. We're going to define what additive manufacturing is and kind of look at why people want to get involved with it and why they're using it. We're going to talk for another 30 seconds about end-use parts. Most of what we're going to be focusing on is aids to manufacturing. We're going to talk about another use that most people really aren't aware of using additive for repair or MRO, maintenance, repair, and overhaul tool, and then some hints and tips on getting started. So next slide, please. All right, so CCAT's Advanced Manufacturing Center is involved in applying up-to-date modern technologies. We work with a wide variety of manufacturers. Our goal is to innovate, to try new things, to validate technology and demonstrate it. So companies come to us with a problem, they come to us interested in finding out more about our technology. We can work with that company to actually take their part, build it additively in several different technologies, see if it makes sense or not, which technology makes the most sense, and then help them to adopt it if that's the direction they want to go. And just as important as adopting the technology is the ability to help bring a workforce up to speed on additive and these new Industry 4.0 technologies. Next, please. So this is very quickly, we do work, a lot of work, most of our focus is on small to mid-sized manufacturers, but we do work for OEMs. We work for the Department of Defense, NASA, and a wide variety of academic institutions and other entities. So a full breadth of the kinds of customers that we do work with. Next. All right, so let's define what additive is. It is one of the 9 Industry 4.0 technologies. It's a digital technology. So additive manufacturing, or 3D printing, as it's also referred to, uses a digital model to build a part, and instead of removing material, we actually build it layer by layer and add the material where we need it. So that's the primary difference. That allows us a lot of really positive attributes, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So next slide, please. So why use AM? I use the word potential, but it has the potential to make things better or faster or cheaper or lighter than using conventional technologies. So when we look at lighter, here again, last week there was a conversation about generative design, topology optimization, where people are looking to lightweight parts. So Airbus and the bracket in the bottom center right is Airbus bracket. It's flying, and it weighs a tiny fraction of a bracket that's manufactured conventionally. So Airbus is an early adopter of additive. They think that by using additive technologies, they can reduce the weight of an airplane by as much as a ton. And when you look at the fuel savings and carbon savings that much of a reduction makes, it's huge. When you look at high performance vehicles today in the military, they're looking to lightweight vehicles and improve their performance as well. So it's something that is being embraced by many different industries. Typically, there's no tooling, fixtures, molds. So when you do additive, you can save, tens of dollars to hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that normally would be spent on those type things. When fixturing is required, usually you can print that as part of the manufacturing process, the additive process. Another reason that people are looking at additive is that you can make much more complex parts, and you can take individual components and design them as a single piece. So that's called part consolidation. When you look at the fuel nozzle in the bottom center, or the gears on the far right, those are examples of parts that are made where they're consolidating multiple parts into a single piece that's built additively. So the fuel nozzle is from GE, from their LEAP engine. GE is a early and avid user and adopter of additive technologies. The fuel nozzle started out as 20-some individual parts, so they had to manufacture them individually. They had to have multiple suppliers to provide them, inventory them, so on and so forth. Now it's built as a single part. It's lighter in weight because they could rethink the design, and it has a much longer life than a conventionally manufactured part, 5 to 6 times the life. So there's a lot of reasons why they're interested in AM. In the left-hand example, there's a casing that we built from starting with a flat plate to this level of finish. It's about 10 inches in diameter, was about 7.5 hours. So from taking an idea and having a workable, fully solid metal part in your hand, 7.5 hours is pretty amazing when you consider the fact that you don't have to wait for a forging or a casting in order to create it. It's just huge. Next slide, please. People are using additive to create things that are difficult or impossible to do with other conventional technologies. So if you look at the bottom left, we have a heat exchanger. There's a helix inside a tube. It would be impossible to build this as a single piece using conventional technology. Design for end use versus manufacture. So in the previous slide, when we looked at the Airbus bracket, the first ones were built for manufacturability. So you could get tools in them from a machine, 5-axis machine, and it was a compromise of weight, performance, and the ability to manufacture it. And then the lightweighted design using additive, it just opens up a lot of design possibilities. And the heat exchanger on the right, in that photograph here again, it's a very complex part. It has an extremely complex matrix. It would be impossible to build using other technologies. And the concept of free complexity. Here again, if you're using traditional, let's say 5-axis machining, the more complex a part is traditionally, the more time and the more difficulty it is to manufacture. If you look at the part in the middle, this is a matrix, a metal matrix component that was built, and it really takes no more time or effort to build this complex part than it would be if we built just a solid block of material. So here again, the concept of free complexity. All right, next slide, please. All right, very little waste. When we talked about Airbus earlier and their desire to move into additive, they're seeing as much as a 90% reduction in material savings. So we're working with a customer that makes rings for the aerospace industry. They're made from Ti 64. They start with an 1,100-pound forging, they machine it, and they end up with a 75-pound part. So they're creating over 1,000 pounds of scrap titanium. So they have been exploring and working with ways to start with a smaller ring and then just add the features to it that they want. So here again, they themselves are seeing a greater than a 90% material savings. They're using words like, this is game changing for us. The idea of mass customization. So here again, if you look at the teeth, dental fixtures in the center, each one of these is built for an individual patient. They're all built simultaneously on the same build plate. It takes very little, much more time to build a whole plate full of these for individual patients as it would for one. The shoe on the right. So here again, the idea of scanning in a foot, of customizing a shoe design for your foot, for the sport you're playing, and for the conditions that you're playing in. It's a very doable technology that's coming into fruition. Traditionally, we've talked about additive as lending itself better to low to mid volume production. So a few of one part. But now with the technologies are starting to evolve and mature, we're getting to the point where we're starting to talk about with binder jetting and some of the plastic technologies competing with traditional metal injection molding or plastic molding, injection molding, we're talking, thousands, tens of thousands, and even 100,000 parts before it makes sense to buy and have a mold created. Next part, please. So here again, just kind of key points. Additive is rapidly evolving as a mainstream manufacturing tool. It's a subset of tools and the full spectrum of tools that are available to manufacturers. So just like in a traditional manufacturing plant, you have a variety of different kinds of technology, kinds of tools that you're using today. Additive is another set of tools that's available that can do things for you, for the reasons that we just mentioned. Additive is a family of technologies, and it literally is being applied in almost every industry sector and every business size. Next slide, please. So when we look at the additive, it's made up, or there's definitions for the families, and there's actually 7 different families plus hybrid. So hybrid is taking a traditional manufacturing tool and combining it with additive. So we have a hybrid machine here at CCAT that combines metal printing and 5-axis, precision 5-axis machining. So very powerful technologies when you combine them together. The technologies with the stars are ones that we have here on site at CCAT. And so, these are opportunities that we have to share with you and work with you on projects. Next slide, please. So those are, very quickly, I'm not going to go in and define what those families are. We can talk about it offline at any point in time. But what kind of materials can you use? Well, whatever material something is traditionally made of, you can probably use in an additive process. So a full range of plastics or polymers, elastomers, so squeezy rubber-like materials, and engineering grade. So here again, the materials, and we'll hear this multiple times. In fact, it's listed below. The materials are evolving very, very quickly. So the idea of using a high-performance polymer material that's has better mechanical properties than aluminum and is lighter in weight is now coming, possible. A full range of metals, from aluminum, full range of anything that you would traditionally use in a welding process, let's say, or potentially a casting process. A wide variety of composites. So with polymers, with plastic printers, there's a lot of people that are combining chopped carbon fiber and other materials with it. We just have a brand new robotic system installed that actually can print with continuous carbon fiber, making very large parts, but also metal composites and ceramics. So wide variety of materials. Sand. So there's printers out there that are starting to revolutionize the casting industry, digitally here again, printing molds and cores, and is just streamlining the casting process. Your next house could potentially be printed using contour crafting, gigantic gantry or robotic systems that can actually build buildings and build houses. NASA is very interested in that technology for building, the space station on the moon and on Mars. The military, the Marines are big into this right now, using this to develop the technology to build bunkers, to build enclosures in buildings. The idea of biological materials, so to be able to print living tissue is evolving very, very rapidly. And last but not least, here again, if it's hard to do, maybe additive is a good way of doing it, but they can actually start to print foods with it. So seeing some incredibly complex chocolate built with a tremendous matrix. So it's kind of neat. The new materials are rapidly being developed, and there are materials that are being specifically developed for the additive process. So that's really another great application for it. So they're moving beyond traditional materials and customizing it for the process. Next slide, please. All right, so we're going to talk quickly about end-use parts. You can go to the next, please. So here again, it is being used as a manufacturing tool. There are end-use parts being made for it. There's some experimentation being done in end-use parts. So here again, our friends at the University of Maine at the Structures and Composites group there have recently printed a full-size patrol boat. But the medical industry, the aerospace industry, you know, there's just a wide variety of businesses and industries that are starting to use it as a tool. Next slide. So what we're here really though to talk about in more detail is really aids to manufacturing. So thank you. So aids to manufacturing. When you talk to people at GE, as one of the world's largest manufacturers, they talk about additive and adopting additive into their processes. And their philosophy is that they don't think that everything they build is going to be built using additive. Your next GE appliance at home is not going to be built using additive, but almost everything you build is going to be touched by it. So the idea of some component of it maybe, or the fact that they're using it as an aid to their manufacturing process. So, you know, additive is a fantastic tool, fixtures, jigs, assembly guides, you can, you know, read what's there. But basically, if you need it as an adjunct or an aid to a traditional process, additive may be a very interesting tool to use for that. Next slide, please. So another application for it is the idea of prototypes and models. So we've done work with companies where they're a traditional machine shop. They have a very complex part they need to build. So we've printed a model of that part for them. They can hold it in their hand and actually use it and look at it. They can figure out how to fixture it. They can fixture it. And actually, depending on the processes that you're using, they may be able to start making some test cuts on it while they're waiting for the real part to show up. Another interesting thing is the idea where additive has really revolutionized the whole development, reducing the development process. So the idea of coming up with an idea, developing a quick prototype, trying it out, refining the design, building another one, you know, they're able to do in weeks or maybe a few months what would have taken many months or even years historically to do. So originally, additive was looked at as a prototyping tool. It's still very useful for that technology. The concept, a lot of people consider additive to be 21st century duct tape around the factory floor. So when you look at the military as an example, they're doing it in the Navy, but in particular in the Marines. I mean, they're putting machines out in the field, you know, plastic printers with the guys on the front line, and they're using them to just do incredible things. You know, build an idea, build something, you know, as a replacement part, just to do 101 different things with it. Next, please. So aids to manufacturing here again, fixtures, jigs, guides, etc. There's a really wide variety of materials available today, plus the composites. So here again, some of the, like we have a Mark Forge, which uses nylon and chopped carbon fiber. Some of the plastic printers have the ability to stop and add metal inserts during the process. So if you do need to have a more solid, secure fitting, you have the ability to stop and put inserts in. It's cost effective. So the idea of traditionally maybe a fixture jig might only cost you, you know, a couple $100 to have it made. You know, a lot of times these things can be built overnight on a plastic printer for, you know, $10 worth of materials. So, you know, at that kind of cost, looking at it as a tool to build them really starts to get interesting. The idea of trying new things, of redesigning that fixture didn't quite do what I wanted it to do. So there's just a lot of applications for that. It's easy to make design mods and print another one. And in some cases, we're actually going to look at a short video. You can print part numbers. So if it's something that you do incorporate into your manufacturing process, you can print part numbers and other information on it. So people are also using it for 6S, for tool trays, for parts bins. So just a really wide variety of uses. Next slide, please. So there's a variety of technologies. When we were looking at plastics or polymers, there's two in particular that lend themselves really well to traditional manufacturing companies. So stereolithography is a resin-based process. I'm not going to go into great detail on it at this point in time, but here again, it's the oldest of the AM technologies. There's been a lot of evolution in the materials that they're using, a lot of evolution in the equipment and the software that's available. You have the ability even to print clear parts so that you can see internal structures and internal flow channels. It has really excellent surface finish and really fine detail. So for a lot of applications, this is a great technology to use for fixturing. Next, please. Right. The other primary type of technology that's available to most people is the idea of a filament printer. It's also called material extrusion. So here again, I think everyone is probably familiar with these printers. They use a plastic spool, looks like weed whacker material, and it comes in here again a very wide range of materials and properties. So some printers, you can actually print more than one material. So a lot of times if you're making a big part, if the outside of it is important, you might want one material and you might want to use a less expensive material on the inside. A lot of these print support structures while they build, and you can use the same material, so you can have a single head machine and just use one material and do that with. But they also have special material for making support structures that are really easier to remove and post-process. So if we look in the photograph, the bottom photograph, here's a part being built. We have a blue material, which is much more expensive on the outside. The inside has a less expensive material, the white material. And then the beige colored material is actually the support structure that's dissolvable in water. Here again, the idea that you can print parts with a wide variety of materials, but you can also print with composites and continuous carbon fiber, which we talked about before. Next slide, please. Another opportunity that's coming on board is printing with what's called bound materials or bound metals. This is the least expensive way for people to get into printing metals. There's several manufacturers. X1 has recently come online with a really cool system that uses a paste. Desktop Metal has been around for quite a while. They use the rod, which is shown in the right-hand side. And Mark Forged Metal X has a filament that they use, which here again, the rod and the filament are polymer materials with metal powders in them. And then once you print it, you have to then sinter it to burn off the binder and to create a fully solid piece from it. It's available in several different, each of these systems has different materials available for them, and most are available in the most popular types of steels and materials that are available today. Another option, which is kind of interesting, is if you do have an existing plastic printer, you decide to get one, people like BASF sell metal filament. Here again, it's a standard, nylon or polymer of some sort with metal suspended in it. And actually, with BASF, you get coupons to send your parts off to them to be to be centered. And of course, for those of us that have the technology available, the traditional additive manufacturing, mainstream printers, using powder bed, directed energy, or binder jetting are always still available for doing exactly, this kind of work of building aids to manufacturing. Next slide, please. So we're going to take a minute and take a look at a high-tech, non-DoD related company and what they're doing with it. This is if this is going to be an issue, we can just skip it. But basically, Ashley Furniture has the largest case good manufacturing facilities in the world, and using additive manufacturing for a wide variety of fixtures and guides and just everything has really revolutionized the way they manufacture. And once again, the concept of, some of their fixtures and jigs were relatively simple. They were relatively low cost, i.e. on the order of a couple $100 each to build, but now they're making their own, and they're doing it for a tiny fraction. Like I said, for $10, $12 worth of materials, they can go ahead and print the fixtures. Donna, we can just go ahead and skip this if you would, or Ken. So while we're leaving YouTube, so once again, they're have taken a substantial step towards incorporating additive aids into their manufacturing process. And like I said, it really's revolutionized what they do, how they look at it, and the types of things that they're doing with additive. All right, we're going to move on. And so here again, the next concept we're going to talk about is using additive for repair and maintenance. So in particular, one of the technologies in additive called directed energy deposition, and here again we have several DED machines here at CCAT, are excellent tools for doing repairs. They use a fraction of the heat input or the energy that a traditional weld does. So if a part can be repaired using a traditional weld, then it's probably much quicker, easier, and less expensive to do that. But if a part can't be, or if it's a really high dollar value part, or you have a shortage of certified welders running around, additive could potentially be a repair process. So the idea of reducing lead times here again, we're talking to people that can't get repair parts, or they're incredibly long lead time. So the idea of trying to affect a repair and get an asset back into action relatively quickly is a fantastic tool to have available. Here again, we're working with an insurance company that's starting to explore broken pieces of equipment. They have a long lead time on a repair, and the business disruption that causes. So we're beginning to evaluate parts for them on a regular basis. Does this make sense and look like something that we can fix using additive technologies? A lot of people are waiting for parts that are maybe months, or even we've heard as much as 2 years for some castings or some hard to get parts. So here again, how long can you afford to have an asset down? the idea of reducing scrap. So we're working with a company that makes high performance electric motors. If they over machine something or make a mistake in machining, the idea of being able to go back in, replace that material using an additive process, and then they can remachine it and they basically have a new part. So a lot of people were doing a lot of work with the Air Force. They have engines that were built back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, back in the last century, and they're developing, the state-of-the-art equipment now, engines and components, and they're looking for 21st century processes to do those repairs. And so on the repair work that we've done, we've been able to demonstrate that using some of these additive processes, we're able to do in a matter of minutes what would have traditionally taken them days of time to do. And here again, the idea of being able to get an asset back in the air more quickly is the end goal for a lot of the DoD entities. All right, next, please. All right, let's talk about getting started. Next, please. So a lot of people we talk with, one of the things that we say is if you're not doing additive at all today, you probably want to think about getting started with an entry-level plastic printer. And that could be something as simple. This is the Markforged that we have. This Markforged printing, their Onyx material is a $3,000 printer. You can spend a fraction of that to buy a printer online, or you can spend many times that to buy a different type of printer. A lot of people that we've talked to really encourage their staff to just experiment with it. We've heard people that said, hey, you know what, if you need something built at home, bring it in and, build it on the machine. We just want you to be able to use it. The people are going to be learning how to use it. They're going to learn the basic skills they need in order to operate it. They're going to learn the software that they need in order to operate it. And selfishly, by doing that, you're also going to see who's going to embrace the technology. Who does it resonate with? And that's an important thing if you're going to step forward and try to adopt the technology. Next slide, please. So like anything else, you start with the end in mind. So the idea of finding a champion, here again, it's that person that it resonated with that really is excited by it and sees the potential of it. We've seen projects that have died on the vine because they didn't have someone to champion the cause, or they had a champion and they moved on. And so, having someone there to really promote the technology is huge. And then you really need to figure out what it is that you want to do and why do you want to use AM. If you make a part today, you make a widget, and you want to make that exact same widget using additive, can you make it better, cheaper, faster, lighter using any of those criteria that we talked about earlier, or do you just want to make the same widget? If you can't make it better, cheaper, lighter, faster, or one of those other attributes, it might not be a good candidate for additive. What materials do you want to use? So we have this impeller. The one on the left was built with a hybrid machine using 316 stainless steel. The one on the right's a plastic model. So you could use the plastic model to do form and fit, but not function. The one on the the stainless steel is fully functional, fully solid, usable part that could definitely go into testing. What size parts do you want to make? Each of the machines, each of the technologies has a particular build volume. So, you need to be concerned about what's the biggest part you want to make and what do you need for a machine in order to do that? Or do you want to limit the size and it's going to limit the cost of the machine? University of Maine has the largest polymer printer in the world. We have a robot that's does a 2 foot by 2 foot by 5 foot, which is huge by additive standards. So everything's relative, and we have parts, machines that'll do, parts the size of your fists. So wide variety of sizes, wide variety of price points. Next, please. If you decide that you want to move into additive, particularly with metals, it's important to understand the entire process and the resources it's going to take to do that. We'd be happy to talk to you about that and help guide you and give you some advice. There's other resources, obviously, that can do that, but it's just important to understand, just like any other manufacturing technology, what does it take to actually own a 5-axis machine? What does it actually take to own an additive machine? So there's a whole series of things you need to think about, things you need to be aware of what the actual total cost is going to be to incorporate it. Certainly, not of least importance is how do I incorporate additive into my existing quality system. So if you're a manufacturer, you have to worry about your quality system and how is additive going to blend in and be a part of that. Next slide, please. All right, so takeaways. There's several takeaways we're going to go through. Additive is rapidly becoming a mainstream manufacturing tool. It can work synergistically with traditional technologies. So here again, if I'm building something in metals, if surface finish is critical or dimensions are critical, it's probably going to be post-machined on one of our 5-axis milling machines, or one of our milling machines anyway, or other finishing technologies. It's not going to replace traditional tools, manufacturing tools, but it has the potential of being disruptive. Next, please. So it can be used for end-use parts. It's being used for end-use parts, but it's also being used, probably more importantly, for a huge range of fixtures, prototypes, assembly guides, whatever you need in order to assist the manufacturing process. Qualification, people always ask about that, is a top priority of the additive industry as a whole. Academia is actively looking at it, regulatory bodies, government entities. So we've worked with the FAA on conversations about additive and how to speed up the certification process in the aerospace industry, as an example, and the standards organizations. So ASTM, ISO are all very, very actively writing, implementing quality standards for additive manufacturing, right? So additive is here to stay. We've heard from multiple people, oh, it's just, the flavor of the month kind of thing. And no, it's not the flavor of the month. Those people are still making horse carriages instead of automobiles. So it's very much a part of manufacturing today, and it's just going to continue to grow a larger and larger part of manufacturing. It is evolving and being adopted at a much faster rate than many companies realize. And so that's why we're having this conversation today, and why it's important for you to be aware of additive. Design, DFAM, design for additive manufacturing tools, the software are evolving to improve designing for the process to help you build new things in new ways. Here again, last week in the conversation around generative design is a great example of those tools. All of the traditional, Siemens NX, Mastercam, SolidWorks, all of these programs are developing, additive modules. And once again, the materials are evolving incredibly rapidly. So polymers is just amazing at the kinds of materials, the quantity of different materials that are available, and the same thing on the metal side as well. So here again, something to think about is that when you look at today, every major corporation, every state in the U.S., every industrialized nation in the world wants to be a leader in additive manufacturing. And so that's why NERDIC is so important, and all of us working together as a region in New England is important, because we're going to be competing with everybody else in the United States and actually around the world. If you wait until you get your first RFQ from a customer before you get started in it, it's too late. So here again, there's so many companies today that have already begun adopting it. I just came back from an additive conference last week, and you would be surprised at the number of people that were there that work for traditional machining companies that have already started to adopt metal additive as an example. Next, please. All right. So when we talk to some of the major OEMs, from buyers in them in particular, they are starting to actually vet suppliers into those that have additive as a tool and those that don't. And there's several of them that predict that they're going to foresee a shift in their supplier base in the not too distant future to those that do have additive as a tool. Like I said, many companies have already adopted it. The problem is that if you wait for the RFQ to come from your customer and you're interested in moving into doing metal additive, most people estimate it's a 2-year window by the time you figure out what you want to get it in, get your people trained, get your processes up and running and qualified. So if it's a 2-year window, you're too late if you wait. So it's important to explore what additive can do for you today and to get involved with it, become familiar with it, and become comfortable with it. All right, next please. So here again, there's a lot of resources available. We at CCAT are available, for anyone out there. As Ron mentioned earlier, the other tech centers and Berkshire Innovations and obviously the University of Maine and the AMC, their Advanced Manufacturing Center, and their teams, your state MEPs and other organizations, as well as universities. So here again, Vermont Tech College, UMaine, UConn, there's a variety of universities that provide assistance as well. We tell people if this is something that you're really interested and you don't want to spend the money right away, consider using a service bureau. So there's companies out there, most of the additive equipment OEMs have their own service bureaus or can refer you to ones that use their equipment. So the idea of trying it out, see who's going to buy into it, explore the range of things that you can do before buying a large piece of equipment is not a bad way to go. And then here again, to adopt it, you really just want to be creative and think outside the box. What could I have? If I had this, what would it do to make my job easier? Or if I had this, this would make my job easier. So it's a wonderful creative way of thinking for your staff and your people on the floor. Next, please. So that's all I have, and I think we have time to open it up for questions.
Jeff, yeah, I think I got to introduce Nasir also because we want to get some time for the demonstration projects. But Jeff, I know you and I have talked a lot in the past about this, but you're starting to see more parts being like companies, big companies, the big global industrial companies have already identified significant numbers of parts. And you're seeing that growing. I mean, do you have any gauge on the number of parts you're seeing just recently? I know I've seen some info come across my desk.
Boeing, well, here again, I look at some of the early adopters. Boeing is flying, several thousand additive parts, in their fleets. When you look at GE, some of their latest engines that they're developing and are starting to manufacture have a wide variety of additively manufactured parts. When you look at aerospace, so they've adopted. If anyone here has had a hip or a knee replaced, more than likely that was manufactured additively. So the medical industry here again is an early adopter of the technology, and they don't really talk much about it, but the automotive industry and the quantity of parts that they demand are looking at it. And people are not only looking at it as a means of manufacturing, but some people are looking at it as a way of supplementing existing. So we've talked with one aerospace manufacturer they're in the process of qualifying 500 different parts to be made additively. They don't expect to make all of those additively, but their problem is, in fact, they make a bracket. It costs them $200 to have a shop make it for them. It costs $600 to have it made additively. But that is a bargain to them, because if they don't have that part and they can't ship an engine, then it costs them tens of millions of dollars a year in late fees. So that's the way they're looking at it, is that not to replace existing, but to use it to supplement, to make sure that they don't have part shortages.
Yeah, Jeff, that's the idea. You're right. You just want to make sure you've got options on some of these. And we certainly know there's a lot of things we look at where additive doesn't make sense. And that's part of the journey. And I do, Jeff, I mean, you did such a great job. I know we're going to be pressed for time. But you also talked a little bit about the design side. And Nasir, if you can come on now, because Nasir's on that design side. And I know that Forrest even probably is seeing so much of this. And Forrest, if you're on as well, it's about what NERDIC is doing and pulling these programs together, including the MEPs on all of this, and saying, this is a journey. You don't want to be caught behind it, because it's not something you're going to be able to figure out overnight. So that simple polymer printer and getting understanding about the whole additive and design for additive and such. And so at this point, Nasir, I just wanted to introduce you. I know you want to talk about some of the pilots and demonstrations, but I want to make sure that with any of the Q&A, let's include Forrest on that as well, because I know he's probably got some responses. But you guys are the tech guys. I'm not, so I'm gonna step aside now and let you guys handle it.
Sure. We've got a little bit of time here. Thanks, Ron, for the intro. I'll read off a couple of questions here real quick. Jeff, you actually answered a lot of these. One of them, I think, would be, what are some post-processing steps for additive?
Okay. Probably for metals, one of the most prevalent technologies is powder bed fusion. And so powder bed would involve removing support structures. And so that could be very much a hand process. For binder jetting and powder bed fusion, you need to depowder your material. There could be polishing. So if you build near enough net shape, it could be just something as simple as polishing the part. If you build less net shape, so some of the processes like directed energy deposition, you have a coarser finish and a less near net shape size. So here again, if surface finish or dimensions are critical, you're still going to probably do some amount of machining or grinding, and it could be just in the areas where it's needed. It is not necessarily the whole part. Oftentimes heat treating. So on some of the metal parts, there's hipping that can be used, but it's a process that you use in the conventional manufacturing for metals in particular, and for plastics even. You're probably going to use similar technologies and similar processes with additively manufactured parts.
Another question, what are some of the support equipment when onboarding additive manufacturing?
If you're doing plastics, it really depends on the process, but it's minimal. If it's metals, it depends on the process, and it can be quite extensive. So a lot of the processes, binder jetting, directed energy deposition, some types, and powder bed fusion all use powdered metals. So you have to worry about safety issues with it. If it's reactive or non-reactive, you're talking about small particle sizes, so respiratory protection. So that's certainly a consideration. For other support equipment, particularly with metals, here again, you build on a build plate, so you have to remove your part typically from the build plate, and a lot of times just a hacksaw or we'll EDM depending on what we're doing. So those are handy to have. Here again, downdraft table or an ability to safely depowder and remove the powder for powdered metals in particular. So, those are some examples.
Great. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to stop it there. And but we still do welcome your questions. Feel free to continue writing in the chats area or the questions, or email Jeff directly. You'll see my contact at the end as well. You can feel free to email me as well, and I'll forward them over. If you can go to the next slide. So really, the next phase of this program is to give your company the opportunity to realize the benefits of this technology and how it impacts your manufacturing workflows. As Jeff mentioned in the last technology introductory workshop on generative design, we welcome participants to apply for a no-cost generative design technology demonstration project. Those that submitted or those designs that will be submitted are going to go through a design optimization to demonstrate design advantages when employing additive, and then additively produced on systems at CCAT, at Berkshire Innovation Center, BSS Additive, and the University of Maine. The results of the generative design and additive manufacturing processes are intended to be presented during the Additive Technologies virtual demonstrations, which are going to be held August 10th, 17th, and the 31st. The application process to request a technology demonstration for this will remain open until May 28th. I do welcome you to apply by going to ccat.us/NERDIC/apply. We will also be sending this link to you following this presentation. Next slide, please. Next week on May 18th, we'll continue the discussion on additive manufacturing with experts from the Berkshire Innovation Center, BSS Additive, the Mozilla Group, and Roundabout Consulting. They will be presenting benchmarking of 3D printed parts that are manufactured with the Desktop Metal Studio system. You'll learn how installation, maintenance, upgrades, and operator training variables can affect the the quality control of the part. We welcome you to join us for the workshop at 12 p.m. next week. You can register at ccat.us/NERDIC. Next slide. Following that, we have a host of introductory or Industry 4.0 workshops planned for May and June. On May 28th, we'll have the University of Maine and the Vermont Technical College present powder bed fusion and bound metal deposition additive manufacturing processes. Here you can learn the pros and cons of each technology, how additive manufacturing and the design advantages of this technology can add value within supply chains, all while increasing part functionality. On June 8th, Mitch Kaminsky and Steve Bukowski from RAM Engineering will present model-based definition. Here you can learn what model-based definition is, how is design, manufacturing, and inspection data embedded into the 3D model, and how is that information used. You can learn, what is the value of MBD, and how is it a cost-saving technology for your business. Then on June 15th, Renshaw will present machine tool probing for Industry 4.0. Here you can learn what that is and how it helps your manufacturing process. Next slide, please. So with that, want to thank you for your time, for joining on. Again, we welcome you to join on future technology, workshops. And right after this webinar ends, you'll see a survey that'll come up. We really do appreciate your feedback. It lets us know what other technologies you're interested in and how you found the information on this particular technology introduction. If you have any questions, please do feel free to reach out to me directly, and we'll be happy to make connections to any questions that you have. With that, thank you again, and have a good rest of your day.